Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and today I'm very excited. We are talking transportation all week, and we have with us John Briand and David Klewicki. They are with Alliance Air Charter. So, John, if you would please introduce yourself for us.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. My name is John Briand with Alliance Air Charter in Denton, Texas. As far as my background goes, I've always loved aviation ever since I was a young kid. Always been fascinated with airplanes, wanting to know where airplanes are going, following airplanes, tracking them. I just have a fascination with that. So I was lucky enough to have been introduced to a position within an airline, which is a airline aircraft dispatcher, and that basically is a pilot that is on the ground that does flight plans, monitors the aircraft, calculates fuel, weight and balance, does a lot of weather involvement with weather, and weather's another thing that I've always been interested in. So I was able to get a license. You have to be a licensed aircraft dispatcher, and that kind of got the ball rolling from that point. I have a couple friends in the industry that were pilots. They told me about a potential dispatcher position over at a Part 135 cargo airline over in Dallas, and pretty much it's been history since then. I got hired on there and just kind of worked my way up the ranks over there, and then a opportunity presented itself over here for Alliance back in 2007, and pretty much the writing's been on the wall ever since then. So just basically a love for aviation is basically what led me to where I'm at today.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. And David, if you would give us a little bit of your background as well.
Sure. I'm from Hartford, Connecticut, and I've always been interested in aviation. Even before I flew, I would hang out at the airport and just watch the airplanes. Got out of school, really didn't know what I wanted to do. Worked some regular jobs for a while, and knew I was bored and had to do something a little more exciting. So I figured I am going to learn to fly. I've always wanted to do it, or I'm going to. There used to be an ad in the paper that on Sundays you could pay. I think it was $25. This is in the early '80s. And there was an airport outside of Hartford where you could go skydive, do a tandem skydive. So I thought, I didn't look at it as a career or anything. I just looked at it as something exciting to do. And I went out one Sunday and watched the skydivers and thought about it and thought, I think I'm going to learn to fly. But jumping out of the airplane thing wasn't for me. So when I started flying, I didn't even realize what the career options were. It's just something that happened along the way. I kept pursuing it. And in my life a few times, and I'm sure in everybody's life, things happen that, you take a right turn you didn't even realize was there, and everything changes from that point on. And when I finally got my instructor's certificate, it was the middle of winter, and none of the conventional airports where there were normal flight schools were looking to hire anybody. And I ended up at this little airport on the Connecticut River that had a seaplane, and the guy there that ran the show told me, well, I'll tell you what, I'll hire you. If you spend the winter with me, working around the airport, plowing the runway, doing whatever you have to do, and commit to working a year, I'll get you your seaplane rating, and you can teach people seaplane. So I thought, well, that's pretty darn interesting. So I stuck it out with him and actually worked there for 2 years. That started me in my career on floats. So that was a little different, and I really loved it. And it brought me eventually down to Florida, where I worked for a place called Jack Brown's, a famous flight school down there, flying these old Piper Cubs back from the 30s and 40s with no electrical systems for about a year over what was in a very rural part of Central Florida on the lakes, and eventually down to Key West, where I flew for Key West Seaplane out to the Dry Tortugas National Park for about 6 years. So it brought me on a very interesting career path. However, when I left that, my company down there was on hard times. There was a pilot glut. I wasn't really qualified. It wasn't what the airlines wanted at that time, even though I had a lot of hours. And I ended up going in for a part-time job at a company that used to be called Emery Worldwide, and they were starting an expedite division. And that put me on the path to where I am now. So that was another right turn. And that put me in operations. And so through that job, after about a year, I got hired by an airline here in Dallas, somebody that we would work with, and they liked me, so they asked me to come down. And John and I actually worked together at that time. And after over a decade there, John was over here at Alliance. I've always liked working with John. There were a couple other people over here. And I was lucky enough to be offered a job here, and I've been here since September of 2009, and it's a great place.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you, guys. And John, if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of background for Alliance Air Charter itself.
Sure. Back in 2007, Gail had owned a couple airplanes. We currently have...
I'm just going to interrupt you real quick. I need our audience to know that that's Gail Denninger. He is also the CEO of Kep Logistics, as well as a founder of the Colorado Business Roundtable. He also owns Alliance Air Charter. Sorry about that, John. I didn't mean to interrupt, but our audience should probably know that.
That's fine. So back in 2007, Gail had owned a couple aircraft, and was interested in obviously putting them to work instead of having them just kind of sit around. So he approached myself, and we started a cargo operation, which from the beginning was a little rough. We had to go out and find a certificate for the aircraft to fly under. That took some time. During that time, we built a strong team with a maintenance manager and then flight operations department. We recruited pilots at the particular time, and basically we had a whole airline put together without even being able to fly because we didn't have the certificate. So once we did get the certificate, that took about 4 to 6 months. Once we got that up and running, we were able to fly. Mainly what we do is automotive freight for Ford, GM, Chrysler, and really anyone, BMW, Honda. So whenever those particular companies are in need, their trucks are running behind or customs issues, they rely on companies like Alliance to deliver their freight in order to keep the line from shutting down. So pretty much that's what we do. We've grown. From the beginning, we had 4 aircraft. We now have 6 on the certificate. So we have 3 shorts, 360-300s that can carry up to 7,500 pounds. This aircraft is perfect for what we do. It's basically a box truck, if you're not familiar with what the shorts looks like. But it's like a box truck with wings on it. And you can stand up in the cargo area. You can double stack freight. And just really easy to load and offload and move freight from north to south, south to north. And then the other aircraft is a Falcon 20. And this aircraft has been the mainstay pretty much of the industry from the beginning. It's a little bit older of an aircraft, and they can carry up to 5,000 pounds, 5 standard size 48-inch skids will go on that aircraft. And FedEx started that, turned that aircraft, cut doors into it. It was originally a passenger aircraft, but FedEx cut a door in the aircraft, and they used it on their little scheduled runs that they flew. So they since retired that aircraft, and companies like ours here at Alliance, we've picked up on that aircraft and have utilized it ever since. It's just a great aircraft for what we do. It can fly into smaller runways, and pilots enjoy flying it, and just a good all-around cargo aircraft. So with all that, we have grown significantly from the beginning, and we now are up to about 35 total employees. Everyone is based here in Denton, Texas. We do all our maintenance here in Denton. All the pilots live here, and when we do pilot training, that gets farmed out to a company up in New York for the shorts. And then if you're a Falcon pilot, it's here local at DFW Airport. So with all that, we've been blessed with a wonderful support team to help get this off the ground. It wasn't easy in the beginning, and since then we have continued to move and explore other options besides automotive freight. We will fly oil equipment, and basically we'll fly anything. It's just, I'd probably say about 95% of what we do is automotive.
Awesome. So you mentioned a little bit that that certificate took a while to get. Would you mind explaining the process behind that? Why exactly you needed the certificate and why it took so long?
Sure. Yeah, all airlines need to have a flight certificate, basically stating from the FAA that you are a registered company and have met the needs of the FAA in order to fly the type of aircraft that you're wanting to fly. So all the airlines, even the major ones, they all have a flight certificate, and basically that is your ticket to business. And once you have that, then you can start flying. It is a little bit of a process to go out and get that. There were a lot of, we had to do several test flights. You do have to prove to the FAA your maintenance procedures. You do have to have we have several books that outline the flight manual, the operations manual, and basically states how you're going to operate the business within those limitations that you outline. So we basically have an outline with all our objectives, and we have to follow that guideline. And all that needs to get approved with the FAA before you can even start the whole process. And basically that's what we did. And it did take a long time, and fortunately we were able to get that. And really we got it within a shorter period of time than some other companies I've heard had to wait to get that.
Yeah, I guess I didn't realize that when you start an airline, you have to write your own manual.
Right, and it is really interesting. There are certain limitations, basically outline what you're going to do, what we can do as far as flying hazardous cargo. There's a hazmat procedure that goes into this. That's just one of them. How our engines are going to be operated and worked on, that's another process. How we're going to do our flight planning, all that is labeled and inside the flight certificate as far as having that.
Gotcha. So you got all your I's dotted and your T's crossed for that, and it took a bit, but you're there now with 35 employees. That's impressive. I do have to ask you, so one of the big things in aviation right now is that there's a huge pilot shortage coming. It's already started. The major airlines, most commercial airlines are already seeing this, but also it's really affecting smaller charters, right? Are you guys seeing any problems with the pilot shortage yet?
Oh, absolutely. This has been ongoing. In fact, way back when I started 20 years ago. I was hearing that there's going to be a pilot shortage, and time would go by, and all of a sudden, within the last year or two, it has really hit. So this year, it hit Alliance very hard. We lost a couple pilots in the beginning of the year. And really every year we'll lose a pilot or two, but this year we lost 4 or 5 in the beginning of the year. So that really has hurt us as far as, being able to crew all the aircraft that we have. So we have put together a recruiting process to really try and limit the loss of pilots going forward in the future, and trying to come up with ways to keep pilots around longer. But something with our airline is we know going into it, when we hire especially a younger pilot, that their goals and aspirations are to go on and fly for a major airline and fly a larger aircraft. And we know that, but if we can get 4 to 5 years out of a particular pilot, we are doing really well if we can do that. So we've had to really try to put our heads together and come up with ways to help make that process where they will stay a little bit longer with us, to maximize what we can out of these pilots as much as we can. There is a lot of training that goes into starting a pilot with our company, and throughout the course of their life with Alliance, the training, and a lot of money goes into everything to keep a pilot here. So we try to maximize what we can out of all the crews.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
So would you say that obviously you are losing the majority of your pilots to major airlines or commercial airlines? Are you losing them to competitors like FedEx?
Larger aircraft carriers, FedEx, the airlines, yes, they're hiring. Just like in the trucking industry right now, there's a shortage of qualified drivers. There's a shortage of qualified pilots. I wish it was this way when I was flying. I would have stayed in the business. It's been cyclical throughout the years. It goes one way, it goes the other. In the 50s, you had a similar situation as air travel was expanding. But it's extreme right now. It is to the extreme, and there's no end in sight. But they move on to the airlines, the commuters. In any case, at any time, the type of airline we are, as John was saying, we're viewed by most of the people that come through here as a stepping stone. It's just that the airline requirements, when there's more of a pilot glut, are higher, and it means they have to spend more time with us to meet those minimums before they can move on. Now, because of the shortage, the airlines have lowered their requirements to a point where they don't have to be with airlines like us quite as long before they reach that threshold and can move to the next step.
And it's typically about 1,500 hours, is that correct?
Yeah. Although I've seen even lower now.
Really, I didn't realize it had gone lower than 1,500. That's wow. They are hurting pretty bad then across the board.
Yeah, they're hurting significantly.
Yeah, that's for sure. That being said, I'm curious to know if you guys have looked at people that have retired, either out of the Air Force or perhaps they were working for ATC. And they have their pilot's license, but it's more of a fun job for them. So obviously the cutoff is 65 across the board for all pilots, right? Mm-hmm. Have you looked into that?
Currently.
Yes, currently. I can see them raising it.
We've looked at I think we've looked at a couple people. There's less of a pool out there now. It used to be more common because up till recently, maybe 5 years ago, I don't know, sometimes things you think happened yesterday happened longer ago than that. But the mandatory pilot retirement age used to be 60. So you had some fairly young people coming into the pool, and even when I was flying, I flew with some retired folks in Key West Seaplane. One of our pilots, Hogan, was a retired airline pilot who'd reached the 60 threshold and had to retire from 121 operations, but still wanted to fly. But now, with the threshold being 65, that pool in itself is thinned quite a bit.
Interesting.
Plus, the other thing is we're loading freight. Someone at that particular age may not really be interested in getting inside the aircraft, strapping down the freight, offloading the freight. Our hours are 24/7, so we're going all times of the day, and without a schedule as far as advanced schedule on when they're going to fly. It really takes someone special, someone who really doesn't know what they're going to be doing tomorrow, and the lifestyle for someone like that. Particularly someone who's in their 60s may not really be interested in something like that.
It's so that's on the road.
Yeah. These guys they finish a trip, they go to the hotel, they sleep, and potentially the next day when they wake up within an hour or two, they're back in the airplane and flying. So it really does take someone special and someone that really wants to and is able to, adjust with their sleeping pattern and fly those types of conditions.
Yeah, so speaking of that, I know that the FAA, and not recently, I want to say it was about 2014, changed their rest rules. Did that affect cargo airlines as well, charter, if you will?
Not really. The schedules, the mandate is for a two-person crew in a 135 charter operation, which we are, is for 14 hours on and 10 hours. Yeah, 10 hours flight time. So the thing about that is it can be a very long day, but also that rotates. So you might come on one day at 3 in the afternoon, fly for 4 hours, get off the clock at 8 in the evening. You're in rest for 10 hours. You come on at what's that? That's 4 in the morning or whatever, or 6 a.m. You might then not fly till 6 that night, or you might fly right away. But you could be starting work one day at 3 in the morning and starting the next day at 8 in the morning and the next day at midnight, and you're also on the road. Mm-hmm. So, you leave base, you might be on the road for a week or more. We try to get everybody home on the weekends, but that's not always possible.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. As you said, it's 24/7, so I'm sure you're working through holidays and things like that too. But so are you hiring right now, I should ask?
Absolutely. We're looking for pilots, obviously. And we just recently hired another flight dispatcher, and we're looking to hire a mechanic. And the mechanic situation is very similar to the pilot situation where, at least in this area, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, there is a little bit of a shortage of skilled mechanics to work on the aircraft. That's another area where we have gone out and tried to recruit mechanics for our particular aircraft. And you always like to try and find someone that has worked on that type of engine or that type of aircraft. And here lately it's been a little bit more difficult. But definitely the pilot shortage is in full bloom, and the mechanic shortage is right behind it, at least in the DFW area.
Yeah. So if you are a pilot and you are interested in getting a job, check out Alliance Air Charter. You can Google that, but allianceaircharter.com as well. I'm sure there's a careers tab. Be sure to check that out. Also, check us out at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and we have been talking transportation all week, and I have on the line with me right now John Briand and David Klewicki. They are with Alliance Air Charter, and we got your background in the last segment, and we were talking a little bit about, the pilot shortage that's an issue for you, as well as the mechanical shortage. So again, if you're looking for a job, allianceaircharter.com. But David, tell us real quick, why do you exist?
Well, us and the airlines like us are in a little bit of a niche industry, and we are the product of NAFTA. Companies like us existed prior to the existence of NAFTA, but NAFTA is really the cornerstone of what drove the industry. And that what that did is that took the automotive industry and spread out its supply bases and manufacturing bases between central Mexico, the border area on either side of the border, and up into the area where the big three are, up in Michigan. And then in the last 10 to 15 years, you've really seen the economies of the Southeast, Mississippi, Alabama, the Carolinas, Georgia, Tennessee, go from agrarian and a mixed economy to being an automotive and technology economy. So automotive is really what drives us. Automotive is probably responsible for 95 to 97% of what we do. Everything else that we're here to do, we'll do anything, but our airplanes are available and the revenue comes in because of automotive. And that's simply because it costs, when an automotive plant is driving out a car a minute, the cost of shutting down that line is astronomical, hundreds of thousands of dollars over and over again, hour after hour. And so if a product, if a supply, and it could be a box of bolts, can't cross the border in time and that line's going to shut down because it's not there, it begins to make good economic sense to take an airplane, fly it down to the location where the parts are, pick those parts up, and get them to the manufacturer or the next supplier up the chain as quick as possible. Another thing with NAFTA, and a lot of people don't realize this, is that parts move across the border in both directions over and over. And I've heard different estimates, but most automotive parts and assemblies move across the border, mainly between Mexico and the U.S., up to 4 to 8 times before a finished vehicle comes off the line. So you might have a wheel assembly or a driveline assembly that's manufactured in Mexico, comes up to the United States, has some kind of electronic components attached, goes back down to Mexico for further assembly, and then comes back over the border to a plant to finally be put on a vehicle on the production line. So that's the core of our industry, but we've done a bunch of interesting charters that have come down the line, in the 20 years that we've been doing this, and maybe John can tell you more about that, but it's been everything from moving dogs and cats after Katrina, moving sea turtles. We've moved Velveeta cheese boxes,
Pizza boxes.
T-shirts after the big game. But automotive is the core.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we did move T-shirts, I think, for the Denver Broncos after they won their last Super Bowl. So
now,
I remember that.
I got to ask you this. I don't want to get you in any trouble, but did you happen to skim a shirt off the top there for yourselves?
No,
hasn't worked out.
Dang it!
No, we weren't able to do that, but some definitely some interesting moves like that. I know I've been asked to. There was an alligator that was coming off a Australian airline here in the Dallas area, and it was going to a zoo up in Ohio. And unfortunately, we didn't have the particular aircraft that the alligator was going to be required to ship on that particular day, and they needed it there. So I'm not sure how they got it there, but that was one that potentially was going to be an interesting move. And some of the other moves, generators after hurricanes, we get some interesting calls. Hurricanes kind of generate some charters that are a little bit different from the normal charters that we do, but generators down to Puerto Rico, we've flown those. Last winter, we flew. There was a mission down in Nuevo Laredo that the children down there were needing winter jackets. So up here, there was a church that asked if they collected a bunch of jackets, and they asked one of our employees if we would be able to take these jackets down to Laredo. And we go to Laredo about 3 or 4 times a week. So basically what we did, we gathered all the jackets. They had them in these trash bags, and we put them on pallets and waited until the next flight that was headed down to Laredo. We threw, and were able to throw all the jackets on there. This was back in December. And the jackets made it down there, and then they went across the border to Nuevo Laredo. So that's kind of an interesting story that kind of different than what we normally do. But basically, we would fly anything that will fit in our aircraft, or we'll go out and find another aircraft that it will fit into. I think, Dave, if you remember another. We flew turtles. They were rescued turtles from Hurricane, I believe it was Katrina. Was it Hurricane Katrina? There were a bunch of small turtles that were washed up on shore and needed rescued. And we were contacted to fly those over to Florida, I believe the Tampa area, and we flew all those on the shorts. So that was kind of a feel-good story that, you're able to go home and feel like you've accomplished something and make you feel good about doing something like that. So those are just a couple stories.
And John mentioned that we reach out for other aircraft if ours can't do the job itself, or there's a better option. And that points to something else. We're not just an airline. We're an air charter manager. So when people come to us, not only do we have the expertise of actually being an airline and running airplanes, but we will seek out the best airplane for any particular move. So if you have a 5-pound box and require a smaller airplane, we can do that. If you have 43,000-pound plates, which we've done that, we'll seek out a 747 or whatever the appropriate airplane is and do that. So we're not just having people calling us for our airplanes. They call us as experts, and then we manage that transportation for them.
That's fascinating. I didn't realize that you guys did that.
Yeah, and that includes door-to-door. So we'll set up all the transportation, whatever kind of trucking is required, from a sprinter van to a flatbed, whatever's needed, the load and the offload, the specialized equipment. We do everything from the shipper to the consignee.
That's awesome. So I can literally go on to allianceaircharter.com and say that I need flowers delivered on an airplane from Denver to Kentucky, London, Kentucky, and you'll do that for me if I'm willing to pay for it?
Mm-hmm, you bet.
I love that. So my mom's going to get some flowers soon. So I will be checking that out later today.
Okay.
I wanted to go back to this, the NAFTA thing, right? That's essentially why you guys exist. You're helping the automotive parts. That is 95 to 97% of your jobs, right? Your moves are automotive moves.
Yes.
So NAFTA, obviously under some fire right now with President Trump and negotiations. Any thoughts on that? If we get rid of NAFTA, what's going to happen?
I think it's a real threat to what we do, and I think NAFTA, I believe, is so important for our economy. A lot of people don't realize the international the specter of international trade. When we say foreign automakers, what's a foreign automaker? It's hard to tell nowadays because Hondas are made in Alabama, Mercedes made in Alabama, BMW's made in the Carolinas, Nissan is made in Tennessee. There's such a gray area of what a foreign automaker is. Hyundai is made in Mississippi. Kia is made in Mississippi. The lines are very, very blurred. If you hurt Toyota sales, you hurt the U.S. economy. To say that Ford, GM, and Chrysler are U.S. companies and everybody else is a foreign automaker, well, you know what? Chrysler's owned by Fiat. It's not black and white. NAFTA is very important. It's crucial to the U.S. economy. I wish that would get explained more when all this is brought out, that there is such a mix now, and the cross. If we hurt NAFTA, if we eliminate or damage trade with Mexico, what happens when the price of these U.S. cars that are built here in the U.S. goes up to a point where people can't afford them and the market decreases substantially? How does that help American jobs? How does that help the American economy? I don't see it.
Right. There seems to be this myth going around that NAFTA made people lose jobs when, in fact, the opposite is really quite true.
I think the opposite is very true, and I wish that would get out there more. Yeah.
One of the things that we are working on, the Colorado Business Roundtable, we partnered up with World Trade Center Denver, and we created this Colorado Business Leaders for NAFTA mission. And our focus is on keeping NAFTA, right? That's life without NAFTA is crazy. And one of the things that I think people forget about all the time, right? Yes, we know that manufacturers are under fire with NAFTA. We also know that agriculture is going to take another big hit, but people forget about the supply chain, right?
Right.
Any other thoughts on NAFTA and where you guys would maybe end up if it doesn't go through a renegotiation, if we do? And
well, it's absolutely critical for us that the trade with Mexico be maintained, and that we don't put up barriers to that. And it's not just us. I mean, that obviously affects us, and you can say, well, that's going to affect my company, but I think it affects all of us. It's going to affect all of us. If vegetables can't get picked, it's going to affect us. If cars cost $2,000 more per unit, it's going to affect us. It's critical to our economy, and it has been for a long time. And I think if the real story was out there, the big picture, I just don't think there'd be any issue with it at all. I think the people in this country would see the reality and support it wholeheartedly.
I think so too. Well said. We have about 11 minutes here, guys. Any big cool stories that you want to share? Any other moves that you've made that really stuck out for you?
There was that time John saved the world. No, I'm just kidding.
I do feel like there is a story there, though.
No. Actually, John saved Alliance. John got us through the recession and brought us out the other side, and I think that deserves a mention on this program.
Absolutely. Tell us.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
Back in 2009, the automotive industry took a little bit of a nosedive, to say the least. So our business, obviously was hurting. We had to try to get creative, and then that was back when the Cash for Clunkers started.
Yeah.
And that pretty much kicked off a lot of charters. It really started the whole industry picking up from that point on. At that point, we needed to I needed another dispatcher. Dave was the first hire on at that point when we started picking up, and then we were able to move forward as far as driving the business and hiring more. We hired more pilots. That's shortly thereafter is when we added the third aircraft, which was a shorts. And then about 2 years later, we ended up adding another Falcon. So ever since then, we've had some. It's been the roller coaster's been going up. It would take a couple nosedives a little bit, but then would keep continuing going on from there. So the industry is really interesting. It used to be able to predict when we're going to be busy. There were certain times of the year when we're super busy, and then certain times of the year where it's a little bit slower. And right now, it's not like that at all. It's pretty much we've been busy year-round. Our first quarter this year is the best first quarter that we've had since we started. And in the years past, it would always be really slow the first 3 months. So we have a lot to look forward to, and obviously couldn't do any of it without a great support team and everyone that we have up in Denver that helps us, and the team that's put together here. It's a great driving force that we have.
Awesome, guys. Just want to check out, what does the future of the industry hold?
The future of the industry, like everything nowadays, it can be hard to imagine, because I think there's going to be major changes. Over the years that I've been in the industry, and it's been in one way or another over 30, I've seen tremendous changes, and it usually coincides with the ups and downs of the economy. People learn to do things a little differently, a little more conservatively, a little more efficiently. So we've seen those changes. People relying on scheduled services more, trucking more. These have always been threats to our industry. But overall, industry has grown to where, even though a higher percentage of freight now travels on other forms of expedite, we're still busier than we've ever been. But I look at the future of the industry, and I've been to I've heard some people speak, particularly some R&D people in the automotive industry, and you hear where automotive is going, and you hear about cars being designed that don't even have seats that face forward. Ultimately in the future, in 25 or 50 years, driverless cars that'll be truly hands-free automated devices. And I can't imagine, and I think the pilot shortage may be a driving force that will expedite this. But I'm sure people are looking at similar things with airplanes. And, you hear people talk about flying passenger airplanes without a pilot. I don't think that will be where things begin, but I think where they might begin, and I think we have to be cognizant of this moving into the future, is that in a 10-year outlook or a 20-year outlook, I could certainly see UAVs being utilized for some of the work that we do. I could see air routes being established by major manufacturers between certain points, where at least starting out with smaller shipments. If you have somebody that's regularly flying shipments up to 200-300 pounds between Mexico and Detroit, I could certainly see within 20 years some type of pilotless service for that being developed. And I think that's the future. Maybe a 20-year outlook, but I think we'll see that.
Absolutely. Well, we've seen drones, right? Drones have been in the military for years, drone aircraft, and so you've got men on the ground flying those aircraft. So I think it's interesting that you see that going that way as well. And I do agree with you as far as the passenger planes. I feel like that'll definitely be more of a 50-year outlook, if not longer, because people don't necessarily trust robots just yet, right? We've seen the automated cars crash and things like that. But moving forward, speaking of, improvements and moving on, what about this next generation of aircraft?
Well, that's something here at Alliance that we do have discussions about. we do talk about what direction we're going to move in. Is it a larger aircraft, a smaller one? Is the aircraft, maybe it's not even built yet. Normally what we do is we're buying these aircraft that, for their second life. And some of them, the shorts already had a large cargo door in it, but the Falcons required a cargo door. So that is something that you have to take into consideration as well, because a lot of these aircraft that you could go out potentially think that is perfect for what we do doesn't have a cargo door. And to cut a cargo door in an aircraft is upwards close to $1 million to do that. So you need to keep that in mind. And has that particular aircraft flown as a cargo aircraft before? So a lot of things go into trying to find the next generation aircraft. But, you also need to look at performance. Is the aircraft, just because it may have flown people in a high elevation, hot summer day, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be able to take 7,000 pounds of cargo on a hot day, out of Denver, out of El Paso. Those are all things you do need to consider when we are looking at the next generation aircraft. But I know FedEx right now, they're flying ATR 472s. Those seem to be doing really well for them at this point. A couple airlines in our industry have, there's one airline that has started to bring that aircraft on. So that's one that we've been interested potentially looking at. But it's interesting to see some of the other companies have come out. They've brought on an aircraft, and the next thing, it doesn't really work for what we do, but they'll put it on a scheduled run because it is something that they can monitor the temperature a little bit better, and they can rotate their aircraft based on the cargo needs and the temperature in seasonal operations, such as UPS and FedEx, where they have a lot of seasonal Christmas help. Certain aircraft are designed better for that type of operation than a different type of aircraft. So you do have to take all that into consideration when you are looking at the next generation. But that is something that we do talk about. We do look at aircraft that are coming available. A lot of aircraft are parked right now out in the desert in Arizona and California. So those aircraft do become available. When they do become a certain age, the price on them do go down a little bit more. So, but definitely something that we are aware of and try to look at moving forward in the future, the next generation aircraft.
I love it. Thank you so much, you guys. We've had a great talk here. I'm going to plug for you one more time at allianceaircharter.com. Again, if you are a pilot and you need a job, if you are an air mechanic and you need a job, and also if you want to ship some flowers to your mom, these guys will do it for you.
Absolutely. We'll ship anything, as long as it fits.
Exactly. If it fits, it ships.
Yes, there you go.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. It's been a great time with you here. Check out this podcast and more at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day.